Welcome to Create More Intimacy, a podcast for men. I'm Elisa Stoddard, and I help successful men stop chasing sex and start building real connection so they finally feel close, connected, and wanted again. You've started to change, not performing it, not doing it for an audience, actually changing. You're calmer in conversations, you're noticing things that you used to miss. You're showing up in ways that used to feel foreign to you. And she is still watching you like she's waiting for the other shoe to drop. You bring her coffee, and she says thank you in a tone that sounds like she's bracing for something. You stay calm during a disagreement that would have set you off 6 months ago. And instead of relief, you see something closer to suspicion cross her face. You do the thing you said you'd do consistently for weeks, and she still hasn't let her guard down. This is where a lot of men get stuck. Not because the change didn't work, because they expected the change to be met with trust, and instead, it's being met with a test. Welcome to episode 67, Why She Still Doesn't Believe You've Changed. Here's what's easy to miss when you're the one doing the changing. You know your intentions. You know you mean it this time. You've felt the shift internally, and from where you're standing, that shift should be self-evident. But she doesn't have access to your intentions. She only has access to your behavior over time. And behavior over time is exactly what got you here in the first place. If trust had been damaged, and for most couples in this situation it has, then the version of you she's used to is the version that changes for a week or two and then reverts. The version who tries hard right after the blow-up and quietly stops trying once the tension eases. The version who says the right things when it matters and does the old things when it doesn't. So when the new version of you shows up, she's not comparing it to the man you want to be. She's comparing it to the pattern she's already lived through. And that pattern has taught her early consistency is not proof of anything. It's just the part before the reversion. This is why she's testing instead of trusting. Trust is not a switch that flips because you've decided to be different. It's a conclusion that she reaches after watching enough evidence accumulate that the new pattern is actually a pattern, not just a phase inside the old one. What feels like suspicion to you is actually her trying to protect herself from getting hopeful again and being wrong. She has probably been hopeful before. She has probably let herself believe things had shifted only to watch it collapse. Testing is what she does instead of hoping blindly a second time. None of this means the change isn't real. It means the change hasn't been proven yet, and in her experience, proof takes longer than intention does. Most men picture testing as a moment they'd recognize immediately, like an argument designed to see if you'll blow up. A direct question meant to trip you up into an old response. Sometimes it looks like that. More often, though, it's smaller and easier to miss entirely. She brings up something that used to make you defensive in a slightly different way than usual, almost testing the temperature before she commits to the conversation. Maybe she waits a beat longer than normal before responding to something you did, watching for whether you'll get impatient with her silence. She doesn't ask for help with something and watches to see if you'll notice on your own. Because noticing without being asked is different information than doing it because you were told to. She brings up something from the past, not to relitigate it, but to see how you'll respond now. Do you get defensive the way you used to? Do you shut the conversation down? Or do you actually stay in it? These moments rarely feel like tests to her. She's not sitting there thinking, let me see if he passes this. She's living inside a nervous system that has learned to scan for danger in this specific relationship. And scanning is what it does automatically now. Every one of these moments is data she's gathering, whether she means to be gathering it or not. The problem is that most men don't recognize these moments as data collection. They experience them as unfairness. She brought up the past again. She didn't say thank you. She still seems tense even though I did the thing. And when it feels unfair, the instinct is to defend yourself or to point out that you did the thing, or to get frustrated that your effort isn't being acknowledged. All of which, from her side, looks exactly like the old pattern showing back up the moment it was tested. Here's where the logic runs backward from what you'd expect. The moment you get frustrated that she's not trusting you yet is often the moment that confirms to her that she's right not to trust you yet. And here's why. If the change is real, it should be easy to hold up under a little skepticism. If the change is fragile, if it depends on being believed and appreciated right away, then it's not actually a different way of being. This is old performance wearing a new outfit, one that requires the same emotional payoff the old effort used to require. When you say, "I've been trying so hard and you're still treating me like nothing's different," what she hears underneath that isn't your hurt. What she hears is a condition. Trust me or I'll stop. Believe in this or the effort ends. And a condition like that tells her the change was never really about becoming someone different. It was about earning something from her, which means it's just the old dynamic in a different form. This doesn't mean your frustration isn't legitimate. It might genuinely be exhausting to change and not be met with immediate relief. That frustration is real. But expressing it as pressure on her to trust you faster is the fastest way to reset the clock she's keeping in her head. What actually moves things forward is staying steady even when the test doesn't appear to be going your way. Not performing patience for her benefit, but actually being able to tolerate her skepticism without needing her to resolve it for you. That is not the same as pretending it doesn't bother you. It's being able to feel bothered and stay grounded anyway, instead of needing her reaction to regulate how you feel about your own change. This is the part of episode 66 worth carrying forward. Becoming doesn't need an audience. If it did, it was never about becoming in the first place. It was proving. And proving collapses the second the audience stops responding the way you need them to. If testing isn't going to just stop because you asked it to, the question then becomes, what actually does move the needle? The honest answer is unglamorous. It's repetition over a longer stretch than feels fair, in situations that don't have an audience or a payoff attached. Trust rebuilds fastest in the moments she's not watching for it, not the conversation where you know this matters and you're consciously being your best self. The random Tuesday where something minor goes wrong and your first response, the automatic one, before you've even had time to think about it, is the new pattern instead of the old one. Those moments count more than the deliberate ones because they can't be explained away as effort. They are evidence of who you actually are when nobody's grading the performance. This also means the timeline is going to be longer than you want it to be. If the old pattern took years to establish, a few weeks or even a few months of the new pattern isn't going to override it. That is not a punishment. It's just how trust actually works. It's slow to build and fast to break, and there's no way to negotiate a shortcut on that. What you can control is whether you keep showing up the same way regardless of whether she's noticing, regardless of whether she says thank you, regardless of whether this particular week feels like it's working. The men who eventually earn trust back aren't the ones who change the hardest for the shortest amount of time. They're the ones who keep being the same person, whether or not anyone is clapping. It's also fair to say the plainly unfair part out loud. You're the one doing the daily work of change, while she gets to decide when she believes it. That imbalance is real. But wanting it to be fair and needing her to speed up her trust on your timeline are two different things, and only one of them is something that you actually have control over. At some point, you're going to fail one. You'll get defensive when you meant to stay calm. You'll get short with her when you meant to be patient. You will revert, even briefly, to the exact pattern you're trying to leave behind. This is where a lot of men do the most damage, not in the moment of the slip, but in what they do afterward. Some men spiral into shame, convinced the relapse proves the whole effort was fake. Others get defensive about the slip itself, trying to argue that one moment shouldn't undo weeks of progress. Neither of those responses is what actually repairs it. What repairs it is naming what happened without collapsing into it. Not, "See, I told you I'd never change." And not, "That doesn't count. I've been doing so well." Rather, something closer to, "That was the old pattern. I see it. I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen." That kind of acknowledgement does something a defense never can. It tells her you're not asking her to overlook the slip in exchange for the progress. You're showing her that the awareness itself is part of what's different now. The old version of you probably didn't notice the pattern in real time, or noticed it and argued it wasn't a big deal. The new version notices it and says so without needing her to immediately forgive in exchange. A single slip doesn't reset the whole timeline the way most men fear it does. What resets the timeline is a slip followed by defensiveness, because that's the sequence that tells her nothing underneath actually shifted. A slip followed by ownership is, ironically, sometimes more convincing than a string of good days, because it shows her what happens when things go wrong, which is the actual information she's been trying to gather all along. If you've been doing the work and you're frustrated that it isn't being met with trust yet, that frustration makes sense. Nobody enjoys putting in the effort and having it questioned. But her testing isn't evidence that the change doesn't matter. It's evidence that the change was real enough to require more than good intentions to repair. Ask yourself honestly this week, where are you needing her belief to keep your own effort going? Where does her skepticism make you want to stop, or make your case, or point out everything you've already done? And where could you let a test happen, let it feel unfair, and stay steady anyway? Not because you're performing patience, but because that's who you're actually choosing to be now. You don't need her to trust you yet in order for the change to be real. You need the change to be real long enough that trust becomes the only reasonable conclusion left. If you want help figuring out what that actually looks like in your marriage, not as a concept, but as a daily practice, you can book a relationship clarity call with me. We will look honestly at where you are, what's been happening, and what you need to shift for the trust to catch up to the change you're already living out. No pressure either way, just clarity. Book your call right now. Take care. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here. If something in this episode hit home, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more men find the support they need. And if you are ready to get help or take the next step, you'll find the link to book a free call in the show notes. I'll see you next time.